proportional response. Book 1, Chapter 14, Part 10, Taking Desperate Measures. Eldia felt herself being guided to the couch as Henry sat down, put her next to himself, and gestured for everyone else to sit. Once everyone seemed comfortable, he turned to Jake.
Okay, how bad is it? Could this fat cat have compromised our network without us realizing it?
Jake shook his head vehemently.
Not a chance. He is good, I'll give him that. But he is not that good. He is also notoriously lazy. He never changes any of his programs unless they stop working, and sometimes not even then. You will see him using the same exploit over and over again, even if it is patched, with all of the same code. For a while, the guys chasing him thought he was just a clever script kiddie, and his tendency to reuse everything is what finally got him caught. While you were interrogating that jerk, I pulled the code our guys got when they caught him and started running analysis between that and the penetration attempts we've been seeing, and the number of matches I have is way beyond what I would expect if I had a less lazy, but equally skilled, hacker's code repository. We've also been closely monitoring all inbound traffic since the hacking attempts stepped up, and I can say with confidence that nothing has gotten past the second honeypot. So, no, he hasn't penetrated our actual network. I also set my boys to examining our logs of the planetary network as soon as I got the repository downloaded. They have already given me some preliminary answers, and it ain't pretty. I'm just glad we had the Arabso, Themic and Inventor take some of my boys on. I'm pretty sure they haven't been compromised, but it is looking like everyone else has been already. Except the Bither. Maybe.
Jake set his pad on the coffee table and tapped some buttons. A hologram flared up. Eldia looked at it with interest, but could make no sense of it at all. A bunch of shapes floated in the air, all connected with glowing lines that had dots moving along them. There seemed to be some significance to both the shapes and the colors, but she couldn't make sense of any of it. Jake tapped a few more keys and one shape lit up, along with some of the lines going from it. The lit lines moved through several smaller shapes and stopped at some of the larger ones. Jake pointed at the first shape.
This is what we have so far. The highlighted paths are ones we know are compromised so far, but I suspect it is much more, you see.
Henry interrupted by clearing his throat. Jake looked at him in annoyance, then rolled his eyes.
Fine. Suffice it to say that I'm pretty sure they've penetrated most everyone that doesn't have human hackers guarding their networks. And I'm not sure how long the Themic nor Arabso will last without more help than they have.
He flicked his wrist and brought the hologram down.
We need to do something, boss, and quickly.
Henry nodded.
Do you think our allies can hold out for another week if you send them help?
Jake made an odd sound with his nose.
Sure, but it is not them I'm worried about. Those brightly lit lines, those are slow but constant data transfers, which I'd bet is our fat cat slowly pulling in every scrap of information everyone had. If they get enough of it.
Henry grimaced.
They may begin to understand a little too much of the scope of our operations and start disrupting things. We can't have that. Can you interrupt his data flows? Sure. I have his code. It shouldn't be too hard to write something that will cause a failure that looks like it is his fault. At least until they reverse engineer everything. That would shut it down for a while. I could probably give you a week, but they will figure out it was us.
Henry sighed deeply and looked at the colonel, who nodded. He then looked back at Jake.
The regular fighter practice is tonight, and I want to consult our allies on this. I don't like the idea of taking this guy out. It would be messy, and the Daltons would blame us even if they can't find proof. Still, we can't let these downloads continue.
The colonel spoke up.
So don't.
Everyone looked at him in confusion, but he turned to Jake.
How hard is it to crash this planetary internet? And how long do you think you can keep it crashed without the Zoltans figuring out we did it?
Jake's face split in a feral grin that Eldia felt was completely at odds with the man's sloppy appearance.
Child's play. And at least 3 days without any risk. As much as 4, if you want to push it. We will need a couple of weeks to retool the /n-burn protocol though. We will be using some of those exploits to keep their network down.
Henry sighed and nodded.
Do it. Now. I'm going to go wake up some allies on the secure lines.
Minibal walked into the room and tried to look around as he waited for his eyes to adjust. His sleep-deprived eyes had trouble transitioning from the bright summer's evening outside to the indoor lighting of the conference room. being awakened in the middle of the night to have Henry explain that they'd crashed the planetary internet, and why, had not been a recipe for a good night's sleep. His nose wrinkled as he took a seat. I am glad that the humans installed a climate control field around their courtyard. This room is ripe enough as it is with all the sweaty body. I'd hate to think how much sweatier they'd be in the height of summer if the humans didn't keep their courtyard so cool. He was surprised to see both the Arabso and Famirkan ambassadors. The Duke and two of his wives were staying out in the courtyard. Only Her Grace Yoro sat in the room. He felt a little exposed without the Duke. Can't have everyone in here, not now, though not when the Zoltan are making it very clear that they believe that the humans are responsible for crashing the internet. They don't really believe it, of course, but that doesn't stop them from laying the blame. He tugged on Vashna's hand and they found a seat. I still have her with me, at least. He allowed himself to enjoy a moment of humor at his own expense. If anyone saw either of us in public without the other, they'd instantly get suspicious. Henry strode into the room last, Eldia right behind him. He didn't exactly have a scowl on his face, but he didn't have his customary smile either. He moved to a seat with large, quick strides and spoke without preamble.
We can keep the planetary internet down for another day without issue, but if we try to go more than 2 more days, we risk discovery. This man has to be dealt with, and fast. Getting to him to simply take him out without being caught would be extremely difficult. He never leaves the Zoltan embassy. He would have been seen, and you can bet that they have to have him under heavy guard. That said, leaving him where he is simply isn't an option. We don't know what secrets he has already gathered from the other embassies. The plan may already be terribly compromised.
Henry paused to meet everyone's eyes.
We have very little time, but I called all of you together because I am hoping you can come up with options. We can all filter back in here once more before practice is done, but if we can't come up with options, my government has ruled this man's actions to be high treason in a time of war, marked him as an enemy combatant, and authorized extreme sanction. If necessary.
Anibal's heart ached to see the water well up in Henry's eyes, though his brother's face remained stolidly composed. He noticed movement to his side, and Ambassador Ballard waved a webbed hand in the air.
Henry, I am afraid I may be experiencing a translator error. By extreme sanction, you can't possibly mean.
Henry gave the ambassador a grave nod.
Further damage must be prevented. It is not impossible that he could breach this embassy's computers given enough time. That would be bad if it happens now, and a total disaster if it happens before the vote of no confidence. Of course, if we go in there and kill him, there will be no way to disguise who did it, and the war will be upon us. The Confederation military was already mobilizing for an internal matter, so that has given us some small cover for increasing the level of readiness across the board. Not that much has happened in the few hours since we found out the Sultans had. This guy, Dot. So, Balud, yes, the Confederation will absolutely go in there and kill this guy if no other way can be found. If it comes to that, we will try to do it quietly, but we'll go guns blazing if necessary.
Henry took a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair.
My intel people are stumped, as am I. I am hoping that one of you can see a way out of this, because if we can't find one, then by this time, 2 days from now, the known galaxy will be at war.
Anibal's breath caught as the words settled over the room like a wet blanket. His heart pounded in his chest, yet the color drained from his hands, and he began to feel lightheaded. War. He knew it was coming, knew it couldn't be avoided, but he also knew they weren't ready. They needed a few more months at least to put the last pins in place and minimize the damage to both sides. Sure, we will win if war starts a few days from now, but the cost will be... Yoro furrowed her brow and then spoke.
Couldn't the Human Confederation just hire the man at a greater price than the Yoltans are paying? I know they must be paying him a king's ransom, but surely you could still offer more and put in an offer of clemency to boot. Not an ideal situation, of course, to let someone like that off from his crimes, but...
Jake shook his head and held up a hand.
Sadly, this miscreant is the kind to carry a grudge, and guys I knew who took him down are sure that part of the reason he's working for the Zoltans is that they are the biggest enemies of those who bested him.
Yoro's frown deepened.
That is conjecture though, and based on a psyche profile that is half a generation old. I mean, surely we can find a way to approach him with an offer, at least.
Henry shook his head.
Too risky. If he turns it down, then he will have an opportunity to alert the Exaltans before we do something about it. A good thought, Your Grace, and one I'd prefer to follow, even as much as that clemency would stick in my craw, but the risks are far too high.
A dark, brooding silence settled on the room, and Imbile tried not to fidget. Then a whisper, one which wouldn't have been heard except for the deathly silence, floated through the air.
The Findil and the Bytha.
The sound made him start, and then realization that Vashna had said it made him start again. All eyes turned to his girlfriend, and he felt his own hands blush in response. But she sat there, a picture of perfect poise. Henry is right. That is some noble upbringing, but sometimes this girl scares me a little. Why did he find that thrilling somehow? I am a coward, damn it. I like being a coward, it keeps me safe.